So, welcome to today's Inspired Good Fat Life podcast. I'm so excited to be here with our guest today. We're just so blessed to have such great guests. But first, I want to just point out the magazine. So, the Good Fat Life podcast is a offshoot of the Good Fat Life magazine. And it's available for subscription in like a real magazine or online. You can go to goodfatlife.com. But so today we get to bring one of our writers and authors in the magazine to life. And so I want to welcome Samantha Gardner to the show. And she has a company called the Qualitarian, right? And so where did that name come from?
The school that I chose to go learn nutrition, it doesn't subscribe to a diet, but rather a whole food diet. And so back in the day when, I would say that there's still a wealth of information around nutrition. There's also a lot of fad diets and such, right? So
Right.
I was following, I think it was called the Rawtarian, just to understand carbohydrates better at the time. And I thought, well, what could I be that doesn't subscribe to, say, a vegetarian or paleo or keto or any of this? What would be a good umbrella for a whole food diet? And so when I'm working with people, I encourage them to focus on quality as opposed to eliminating things, unless, of course, they have to.
Right.
And so Qualitarian.
Qualitarian.
Yeah.
I never knew that, Sam. That's awesome. And that so fits, right? So what I'm so excited about our conversation today is, in case you haven't realized, Sam's a nutritionist as well as a Reiki master and a yoga. Do you teach yoga?
No.
Oh, okay. You just like yoga.
I'm a student for life.
Student for life. There you go. I mean, she's got so many skills, and she's a brilliant decorator. I don't even know if that's the right. You're a beautiful placemaker. So right, yeah, that. But one of the things like I said, started realizing that our nervous systems are pretty whacked out right now. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
We see it over and over. People have just had their nervous systems have been so traumatized over the last couple of years, and now that kind of we're coming out of it, I think it's even showing up more dramatically than when we were in the middle of COVID because we just didn't know, right?
Sure.
So now that it's kind of life's coming up, I'm flying tomorrow home for a family funeral, and masks are no longer required. So there's all these changes, and it's another kind of an adjustment. But I realize that my nervous system just feels kind of jangly.
Yeah.
So talk about that. I mean, this is your, and how food fits into it in nutrition. So we're going to talk about some things to really help support our nervous system today, right?
Exactly.
Okay, great. So where do you start?
Well, understanding what it is, what it does. There's lots of definitions for it, but primarily it's like a control system for stress, I guess. I mean, that's just one way you can define it. But if you have two gears, you have your parasympathetic or your rest and digest, and you have your sympathetic, your fight or flight. What happens in today's world, so that switch between the two nervous systems can happen and was supposed to happen in 1 second or less.
Okay.
What happens is when we're bombarded by all this stress all the time, we can get stuck in one gear or the other. And so there's lots of ways that we can support a healthy response to stress so that the nervous system is working better.
Okay.
It's hard to do that when we're up against life, what we're seeing on the news, or drinking too much coffee, or eating foods that make our body out of balance. Everything in our body works to bring, it's supposed to bring homeostasis, right?
Right.
Our blood is the certain pH. Our saliva is a certain pH. Our nervous system needs to be balanced, right? Everything. And so when there's just too much leaning on one side or the other, we behave different. We react different. We may feel like ourselves, not feel like ourselves. It all depends. And everybody's different. But there are ways that we can support a healthy response to stress.
Okay. Well, and I guess what I'm learning is that so much of it is awareness, right? So we can't control the circumstances that we live in, but we can get better at listening to our bodies to understand how to control our response to it.
Yeah.
I mean, that part, I wish I understood that when I was younger. So my hope is, and part of the whole thing with Good Fat Life is finding the education so that my kids and their kids can understand these things at a younger age.
It's true.
Right? And just that awareness. So where do you start?
Everybody's different, right? So I started to understand my health and my wellness with food and how that affected me. So I primarily practice nutrition because of that. And on my own path, I found other healing modalities that better helped my stress. I live in my personal life is very stressful. I have a son. I raise a son with special needs, and it's not easy. So the buck didn't stop at food for me.
Okay.
So I had to learn other ways to support my energy level. And when I got food right, and I really feel like I got food right, and I wasn't 100%, I explored other avenues. So when I say everybody's different, some people may come in a different door, but for me it was food. So I started there because I felt like I could control that.
So, but that's the whole premise of Good Fat Life. It's like, let's start with fat. Mm-hmm. We have to start somewhere, right? Yep. It's little baby steps, one bite at a time.
You can start with a macronutrient. You can start with breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. So I said, starting like with fat, or like with food, it's one thing. You get your good fat right, and it supports so many systems in our body, and then you pick the next thing. Yep. But how do you? I think one of the things, even with how do you get fat right, there's so much variability, right? Yeah,
and there's your ability to digest fat. There's understanding what's good fat, what's bad fat. And then there's, accessibility, affordability. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. But ultimately, it's your desire and your willingness to make better choices at whatever cost that takes. If it takes more time in the kitchen, that's going to cost you time. If it's the grocery store bill, it's going to take time. My opinion, fat in particular, if you want to use that as an example, is probably the most important thing you need to get right.
Well, thank you.
Welcome.
You just made my day.
Oh, good. I probably never told you that, did I?
No, you haven't?
That's usually where I start.
You haven't. I didn't realize that. And it's not easy to get right. And
it depends. It is in this little workbook that I use with HTMA, it is the shortest category. It is the shortest because you can choose to have an understanding around all the different kinds of fats, which you can overthink anything. Right. But the healthier choices are pretty limited because you want to eat as close to nature as possible. So to just have an understanding of what's available to you and always choosing that. The hard part, I think, with most people in fat is convenience food, and it's easier to go and get something at a restaurant, and so if we're relying on restaurant food, you're not going to get a healthy fat source. So, but if it's in your control and you're going to the grocery store, it's actually very easy. You can get the right oil, maybe without going into too much detail about cooking with fat, because
there's temperatures and all.
There's
of that
temperatures,
stuff, right?
So making sure you're using the right fat at the right heats, and oils. Right. This oils go in this category as well. So when it's in your control and you're cooking, it's a lot. It's really simple. There's one thing that I say about fats. I say don't oversimplify, but diversify, and that's because of the omega-3, 6s, and 9s, and we need they build prostaglandins, which are hormones, which control your ability to inflame and anti-inflame. And so those need to be balanced so that you have the right responses in the body.
See, but what you're just saying is it's easy. It's easy when you know, right?
It's easy when you know.
Right? And that's what our kind of goal is with Good Fat Life, is to make it easy to know, to make good choices. But I love what you just said about when it's in your control, because it's easy to eat an avocado when you're at home.
Yes.
Right? But when you're dashing out the door to go to your kid's soccer game or work or whatever it is, it's not easy.
Right.
It's not convenient.
Right. Well, it's not easy because you don't know if you're going to get convenience food or fast food, or you're going to go out to a restaurant, then you don't know what oils they're using.
Right. So that's, okay. So that's a place to start. It's a good place to start. So you, but it's just even the amount to eat is a challenge too.
Well, it is a challenge depending on where you're at. So if you're eating a lot of processed foods, they're causing different chemical reactions in your body and in your brain, and you can't really rely on your craving. Or if there is some hormonal imbalances, you can't really rely on whether or not you're feeling full yet. But once you start eating a healthy diet, you can start to rely on those cravings and trust those cravings that you're having, and trust your ability to, allow yourself to eat certain foods. Because of so much misinformation out there, when somebody who's been avoiding, say, meat has a craving for a burger and in their mind has decided that a burger is bad, but they're craving it and they're not giving it to themselves, then there's an issue. If they're on that whole food journey. Now, if they're craving things and you're eating a bunch of processed food, you can't rely on that craving, because that's almost like a chemically engineered craving, because
You're right.
Yeah, so it all depends.
But it's fascinating, right? So it's so what else? What else impacts the nervous system, our nervous system, besides food? Stress. And so what's a good way?
So, food in particular balances body chemistry. So when I say stress, I'm talking about internal and external.
Okay.
That's what the autonomic nervous system is controlling. The internal and external stresses. So when you're let's just say you're manipulating food,
okay,
right? That's going to help make sure that you get the pH is right in your body, and that you're giving the body the fuel that it needs to work properly. In particular, when it comes to the nervous system, minerals is really important, because stress burns through minerals, and when you don't have that, you're not building the body back properly. So food helps make sure that you're building your body back, you're energizing your body, you're normalizing chemical responses. But that's not going to stop your toxic best friend from gossiping. That's creating external stress that will eventually create internal stress, right? So food is just one thing. Thoughts and beliefs can disrupt the nervous system's normal processes.
But I think what we tend to see is when we get stressed, instead of eating really healthy, making healthy food choices, we go to all the comfort foods, right?
We do. It's a form of
we drink, we eat sugar, we eat processed foods, nachos or whatever.
So if you're going to use food as the door you go into to start healing and relieve some of that stress, if you're an emotional eater and food is your vice, then I wouldn't say eliminating all your awesome food choices when you're feeling that way, but understanding them. And then what I like to say is upgrading them.
Okay.
So if there's a chocolate cake that you prefer, just recreating that healthier version of chocolate cake. And they're out there. I don't necessarily make chocolate cake with avocados anymore, but I've tried. They're out there. So just finding healthier alternatives. I'm a huge fan of potato chips. I go to the potato chips when I'm feeling, I don't know, anything. I'm feeling breakfast. I'm feeling anxious. You know, but there is a chip out there that is made with healthy fat. Right. Particularly, I like an avocado-based potato chip or a coconut oil-based potato chip, and go for it. I mean, just find the alternatives, the healthy alternatives.
I started making air-popped popcorn with olive oil.
Okay.
And instead of chips.
Okay.
When I really want something crunch.
Is there a reason that you chose corn over potato? Like, is there a...
No, just maybe convenience. Okay. But I did, I did put an article in about potatoes. When you cool them, they become resistant starch. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I could totally substitute that, except that it doesn't have the same crunch. But you throw in some celery and some... crunchy vegetables, and it could. But you're right. I mean, there's so many. And last week, we had to miss a really important birthday, and I was, just heartbroken.
Sure.
But it was because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so I did just what you said. I found a recipe and made a lemon cake. With almond flour and a lemon curd, and it was delicious, and I felt better. Right?
So let me just say something, and this is probably more of a personal belief than science, but let's just say you went for the cake. Just say you missed the celebration, but you were going to celebrate, and you chose a cake from Bush's Bakery. Right. You go home and eat the cake. It is, if we're talking about stress and supporting healthy digestion and let's just say you can't control what you're eating, even though you could have made your own cake.
Okay.
Let's just say you can support the nervous system by taking a few deep breaths before you eat the cake.
Okay.
Right? Because digestion is really important when it comes to, doesn't matter what you're eating, but that it comes in and comes out.
Okay.
And the body can absorb as many nutrients that it needs to rebuild itself as possible. Chewing the cake, not drinking too much milk with your cake at the same time so you're not hindering digestive juices. There's lots of things that you can do around how we eat when you can't control what you're eating.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. If, like I said, if the focus is the nervous system and how do I support stress, that was let's just say the celebration you missed is sad. It makes you sad. And so your stress level is going down, but you're trying to lift yourself by still enjoying the rituals around it. Just know that whether you ate the healthy cake or the unhealthy cake, it's thoughts and beliefs too.
Okay. No, that's great. I love that, Sam. I mean, and that's the part that I find so fascinating when we can stop. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the big thing, is like getting ourselves to stop and say, what do I really want to create? What do I want to be intentional about? And how do I do it?
Yeah.
And where, I think the other thing, one of the big reasons I started the magazine was because I found it was so hard to find information that was trusted.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Who do you trust?
Yeah.
Especially because, like you said earlier, there's so many diets out there, and there's diet, I'll just say advocates, people that are really, and it's not, what I've also learned is that it's not, so somebody can do amazingly well on a keto diet or on a vegetarian diet, and the next person, it's a total train wreck because we're different.
We're different. So who do you trust?
Exactly. And
trust yourself.
And that's the message, right? So finding those ways and those people that can help teach us how to trust ourselves and understand our own body and how it works.
Right. And that awareness around how do you feel versus how something is telling you should feel.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And being able to differentiate. And
finding that, and learning to discern what our body's telling us.
Exactly.
Like you said earlier, is it from a chemical standpoint, because it's been manipulated by the choices we've made, or is it really our body saying, "Hey, I need this"?
Yep. Yeah.
So, I honestly think I used to find it overwhelming, and now I find it just inspiring or
Well,
an adventure.
I think the overwhelm is a necessary part, honestly. It's just a learning curve. And if you goes back to awareness, notice that this is the learning curve. It's resistance. It's your internal dialogue saying, "Oh, you're about to change. You sure?" You know, we're not necessarily wired for happiness. We're wired for comfort.
Or keeping us safe.
Keeping us safe is comfort.
Right.
So anytime we go to make a different choice, hopefully one in the healthier direction, you're going to meet that resistance. And so that's going to cause overwhelm. For me, it was anger. I was so angry that when you have a child with special needs, there first is that self-blame. Like, what did I do in my pregnancy? What did I do even before my pregnancy to create this healthy? There's all this blame and around it. But when you realize, the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches aren't healthy, or because for me, I'm not blaming anybody here. But I was raised on peanut butter and jelly, deli sandwiches, fruit, a cookie, milk. You know, and when that's your normal, that's your life, that's your reality, and then you're being told, no, bread's bad, jelly's sugar, peanut butter, mold, like. You're just angry. Like, how come I didn't know this? And then you get overwhelmed. Well, you can blame, or there's that change energy. There's that I can take control of this situation because I'm the one putting the food in the grocery cart. Right. Or I'm the one who's picking that restaurant to eat at. And so when you can confront that and you can control that, then you can make healthier choices.
Well, but I love the way that you put that, because it's true on anything. If we're learning to walk, we're learning to speak, we're learning a new skill, whatever it is, overwhelm always is part of it.
It's part of the learning process.
It's part of the learning process.
Part of the journey.
And part of the creative process.
Yeah, it's what you do with that overwhelm.
That makes the difference.
Do you let it squash your goals and dreams? Or do you take it to the next level? Do you?
Right. And most of us, I will just say, observing, and that's kind of like why resolutions after 7 days are done, is because we haven't created a system or support or something that's going to take us through that
turbulence.
And that frustration. When we feel that overwhelm or whatever it is, there's not something there that's going, okay, come on, that's just part of the process. You can do it. Yeah. Like with going to school. I mean, we have to take those tests, or we have to do those things.
Well, yeah, great. Well, if you're talking about grade school, there was that parent that made you do it. You didn't have much of a choice. You may have lied about going to school that one day or skipped school that one day, but you can't continue to do that.
You still have to show up.
But when you're adults, there's usually not that person telling you need to keep going, don't give up when it gets hard,
Right.
Yeah, and food can be very hard because of all that misinformation, and you have to trust yourself. And so going back to the whole Qualitarian thing, like the least denatured possible. It can't be that bad for you. And if you eat it and it doesn't make you feel well, then don't eat it again, or something different next time. Try it again another time when you get healthier.
So, and that's interesting too, because I know there's been plenty of meals we've had out in restaurants, right?
Sure.
And the restaurants have gotten these rave reviews. They are, not inexpensive. Mm-hmm. And then we go home and we just feel terrible and we don't sleep well all night. And, it's one thing after another. And there's this disconnect. It's like, well, I went to this expensive, acclaimed place, and I don't feel well now, right?
Yep. There's possibly a reason. Could have been bread basket. Could have been
the anything. Oils they use. The mixture of foods don't sit well. All kinds of things. But I just find it interesting. It's like there's so many perspectives to come from.
Could have been the conversation you were having at dinner with the person you were with.
I mean, it could have been, right? It could be all those kinds of things. And so, wow. I always learn so much from you.
Sorry.
No. It's just, but it's kind of like where to start. So let's go back to if somebody is wanting to start, they're just like, you know what, I just want to do a better job. Where do I start? What would you suggest is the simplest thing that somebody could step into?
With nutrition?
Yeah, well, let's say, because we started with the nervous system, and if good nutrition, or even we'll say good fat, is a great
I think a good
place.
start is just surveying what you're already eating.
Okay.
And what do you define as unhealthy? So if I'm already eating, let's just say I'm eating cereal for breakfast, Jimmy John's for lunch. I go home because dinner is really the only time I have to like really cook for myself. And I make a protein, a veg, and a starch. Then really getting clear on what my definition of unhealthy is, right? So Jimmy John's is a big old chunk of bread.
It tastes delicious, by the way.
Yes, I would agree. And I do appreciate their speed, getting it to the yoga studio when I need something filling and fast. But really getting an understanding of what your definition of unhealthy is, and then picking that one thing and upgrading it. I can make a sandwich at home. I can pick boar's head over something in a plastic package that who knows when it was put in that. You know what I mean? So I can choose a quality sandwich, and maybe I want to try you can do pretty decent, like you can get rid of the bread at Jimmy John's and just do that
They had the lettuce
thing.
ones. Yeah. I have had those.
I'm not
before.
really sure about the quality of their lunch meat,
right.
But pick something that you can do. And then, I mean, if it involves research it. You can figure that out pretty quickly on Google, or ask a friend or reach out to.
Or you could come see you and have an assessment.
Yeah. Or, right. I mean, you can just ask me a question, email me. I'm happy to. Most
Okay.
people in this field were helpers, and you can ask a question. If you're going to contact a nutritionist and they're unwilling to answer one question before seeing you, then, find another nutritionist. Yeah, there's cookbooks out there. I mean, there's a plethora of information out there. It's right. Just trusting your ability to start where you're at. For me, I started with a bunch of documentaries. I don't necessarily suggest that, but I needed the brainwashing.
Okay.
I spent 2 days, and I just needed that push to start. I needed that motivation to change. And but the reason I don't recommend documentaries so much these days is if you're not a critical thinker and you're not thinking for yourself, then documentaries can be harmful. That's where you're going to fall into a one size fits all fad diet, and you don't want to end up there because there's motives behind stuff like that.
Right. Well, and the other thing I've learned too is our bodies change.
Our bodies change.
And so what was right at this stage could be different at this stage.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you're gonna learn macronutrients like fats and proteins and carbohydrates, vegetables, then it's not a bad idea to pick up a vegetarian cookbook, because you want to master vegetables. You want to learn how to cook them. You want to learn how to season them because you want your food to taste good. I would recommend not falling into a trap like you have to just eat vegetables to thrive, because that's not true. And if you're going to go meats and you want to understand meats, are meats healthy? Are we supposed to be avoiding unhealthy, or are we supposed to be avoiding red meats? You know what I mean? Pick a cookbook that is something nose to tail, like a meat eaters cookbook or something, that's going to help you understand protein, how to cook it properly, how to season it so that it tastes good, how to cook it right. And then fats. You could definitely pick up a keto cookbook for sure. I mean, especially if the goal is to diversify your fats and get fats right. A keto cookbook's going to teach you 101 different ways to cook an egg and avocado. Like, go there for those to learn and master that macronutrient. But in my opinion, learn to bring it all together so that you're eating balanced meals at every meal. Yeah. And so if you want to start with a macronutrient, start with a macronutrient. If you want to start with breakfast, break that breakfast down. and give yourself a variety of healthy choices for breakfast, something that you need to choose that's on the go, something that you have time because the kids just went off to school and you can cook for yourself. Give yourself a variety of choices and master breakfast before you think about lunch. And until you get to lunch, just remember there's lifestyle choices around eating that can support proper digestion and function so that you don't feel like crap after eating foods
and pay attention to that.
Places. Yeah.
Pay attention to how you feel. Even if you
Well,
cook something at home.
That's how
right?
you learn to trust yourself, right? So notice how it makes you feel afterwards. And if your energy is low, food is not supposed to make your energy low. Food is supposed to give you energy. Right? So notice that. And then go back and be like, why did I eat? Yeah, why was my energy low? And I'll give you a quick tip. It's probably your fat to carb ratio.
Okay.
So play with that. Was there too many carbohydrates that tanked my energy instead of giving it? So if you think of a carbohydrate as kindling on the fire, if you're only feeding the fire kindling, you can never leave the fire because you got to constantly feed it. Fat is like the log on the fire. So you get the log on the fire, you can leave the fire. You're going to come back and the fire is still going to be burning. So that gives you endurance. That gives you longevity. That gives you satiation. So you can go from breakfast to lunch without your energy dipping in between or necessarily snacking. Snacking's not bad. If you need to snack, but try to get a well-rounded meal.
So hold that thought. I'm going to take a quick commercial. So I want to do a shout out to Snedecor's Cleaners. It's spring. And people are getting ready to pack. Actually, it's in May, getting ready to pack their winter clothes away here in Michigan. But moths like clothes that have been packed away that haven't been cleaned, and they don't like clothes that have been dry cleaned before they're packed away. So it's a really good time to go to snedekers.com and they'll pick up your clothes. And they'll bring them back to you all ready to put away for the winter. It's a good service to have. And it makes my life easy. So final thoughts. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where would they find you?
Qualitarian.com is my website, THE-Qualitarian, QUALITARIAN.com. My office is outside or inside Brighton Yoga Center, so you can get a hold of me there as well. My information is on both websites.
On both websites. Okay, and then we will post that with the links and everything. So much to think about. Lots to think about. And we'll be putting a test to help you figure out where you are or what could work for you in our July 1st edition of Good Fat Life that I'm really excited about. I learned a lot with that, and so obviously I have lots more to learn. So thank you so much for being here, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sherri.
Okay.